Good morning, beautiful people. And you could be any place in the world, but you decided to be here with us. So for that, we are grateful. And what a great way to open up the Black Lens Symposium this morning with our dynamic opening keynote, as well as the discussion by Attorney Ben Crump and his counterpart, his colleague. And I hope you've been enjoying the event just as much as I have. I would like to say thank you for choosing this workshop to better enrich yourselves on the mental health and well-being of Black men. Let me share that this experience is going to be FUBU, and it's for us, by us, which means that this workshop is unapologetically for Black men, by Black men. Greatness is upon you, so let's just go ahead and get right into this conversation. My name is Jasmin Spain, and I'm the founder and chief visionary officer for the main initiative, which stands for Males Addressing Issues and Needs. And I'm the founder and president of You Good Bro Incorporated, who is a co-sponsor actually for today's event. Both organizations serve to improve the quality of life of Black men and boys through holistic education, holistic development, transparency, vulnerability, as well as liberation. But I also serve in the space of higher education, currently serving as the assistant vice president of student support at Pitt Community College. Now, I'll be serving as the moderator for this much needed conversation around Black men and boys and the mental health and well-being. But as one who knows their radical kingdom assignment to create experiences for Black male achievement, it's my pleasure to share the stage with other brothers who shares leading experts, thought leaders, practitioners who are radical as well in their work of mental health and healing. So before we submerge ourselves in this deep conversation, I'll allow the panelists to briefly introduce themselves.
So I'm Donald Norwood. You can call me Donald. You can call me Vaughn. Vaughn is my community name. If you know me by Vaughn. If you don't know me, and you know me professionally, you know me by Donald. They both distinguished, but they're both the same person. I'm the co-owner of Lightwork Resources Holistic Health Center. We primarily do counseling and coaching, but we also run master classes, healing workshops. I'm also the co-author of The Guide, A Journey to Spiritual Health, live on Amazon. Here it go right here. It's a guide, comprehensive guide to finding peace, strength, and balance. It's an honor to be here with you guys. Love.
Thank you, Brother Vaughn. All right. Brother Joyner.
All right, I'll jump in there. So I'm Kenneth Joyner, owner of Therapeutic Interactions Counseling Services, licensed clinical social worker. I've been doing direct therapy for about 6 years. No, it's 7 years now. And I've been doing direct therapeutic services in general for about 14 years now. I'm excited about being here. And if you enjoy what you hear, you can also tune into a podcast that me and Brother Spain also foster at. It's called the You Good Bro podcast, and I'll throw it in the chat. And we have many topics surrounding the Black male and things that we deal with, come across on a daily basis. But it's a blessing to be here.
All right. Thank you, Brother Joyner. Thank you. Dr. Grimmett.
Hello, my name is Marc Grimmett. I'm originally from Tuskegee, Alabama. I have two beautiful, brilliant Black boys that I'm their father. And I'm wearing, to send a shout out to Vaughn, I'm wearing my recently passed 100-year-old uncle's shirt. So I'm bringing the ancestors with me as well. I am a licensed psychologist and a professor of counselor education at NC State University, where I direct the Community Counseling Education and Research Center.
Thank you, Dr. Grimmett. And last but not least, Brother Little.
Peace and blessings. Kelly Little, founder of the Urban Institute for Strengthening Families, which is a nonprofit organization committed to Black and brown boys, Black and brown men, and Black and brown families to uplift and create opportunities for us to restore and reimagine where we came from so that we move into our next centuries and generations with the power that we came from, moving beyond that 400 years. Additionally, I own and operate the LeGrand Little Group, which is a executive leadership and life coaching practice committed to first investing in young people, but investing in all people with the continued focus on emotional intelligence. And I would like to say, not only am I Kelly Little, aka the Village King, I am also living in the spirit of Ubuntu. So I am Brother Vaughn, I am Brother Kenneth, I am Brother Mark, and I am Brother Jasmin. So today, I believe in that collective spirit of Ubuntu. I am because all of us are. Peace and blessings.
I feel that.
Thank you, thank you. So let's just go ahead and enter into this dialogic space, man, and let's make it rock. Let's make it rock. So to set the tone, we're gonna start off with you, Dr. Grimmett. Now, the word masculinity, it comes and it goes with many definitions and descriptions. Now, the general definition is a set of attributes, behaviors, and roles associated with men and boys. This includes traits traditionally viewed as masculine in Western society that includes strength, courage, independence, leadership, and assertiveness. Now, you have emotional masculinity, which is in our culture, many men have difficulty expressing emotion due to toxic masculinity. You have toxic masculinity that refers to actions that discourage displays of emotion minus anger in men, while also encouraging behavior that will deem the male dominant in any given situation. Now, I personally viewed your influential film, My Masculinity Helps, which focused on Black men and boys and their prevention of sexual assault. But as well as I've been a former student of yours, and I'm familiar and have witnessed your work to transform contextual and systemic factors to promote the healthy development of Black men and boys. So as we open the doors of this dialogic space, can you lay the foundation and set the agenda straight as to what Black masculinity is and how it intersects with mental health and well-being?
Thank you, Brother Jasmin. I appreciate that introduction. I want to on it some and add some kind of and then get into the conversation. Masculinity is a variation of traditional and hegemonic masculinities that you described. But when you talk about race and gender associated privileges afforded white males in the white American normative, patriarchal, and capitalistic cultural systems of the United States, these have historically and contemporarily oppressed and marginalized Black males. So we see common depictions of Black masculinity in historical and, in quotes, I'm going to say scientific literature, news reports, popular television shows, movies, and social media, for example. And these are heavily focused on stereotypically athletic ability, criminal mindedness, violent behavior, aggression, and hostility in Black men that you described. But within the context of racial oppression, barriers exist to some traditional forms of masculinity, such as accumulation of wealth, social, political, and economic power. Therefore, some Black men, some of us at different points in our lives, have expressed our masculinity in the forms that may include hypermasculinity, cool masculinity, and or, as we get more mature, Afrocentric masculinity. So hypermasculinity, like Jasmin talked about, is a form of hegemonic masculinity that's demonstrated by domination, intimidation, and control of people, along with resistance to domination and the sexual objectification of women. Cool masculinity, or cool pose, is a ritualized form of masculinity that entails behaviors, scripts, physical posturing, impression management, and carefully crafted performances that deliver a single critical message: pride, strength, and control. But Afrocentric masculinity, an Afrocentric perspective of Black masculinity, integrates traditional African spirituality, worldviews, and cultural values that add complexity, meaning, and dynamic variation to traditional hegemonic and cool masculinity ideologies. So Afrocentric masculinity can include a strong sense of self-determination, a sense of family and fraternal commitment, a desire for personal and economic development and growth, personal pride and fortitude, and finally, personal control and volition. But I want us to kind of like focus on today what I talk about sometimes is traditional Black masculinity. And that's what we're doing here is when African-American or Black men intentionally employ our identities in service of social justice and purposefully engage other Black males as well as others for that cause. So this most mature form of Black masculinity and its direct correlation to mental health is about self-understanding, authenticity, empathy, and vulnerability, all of which are required for us to develop intimate, deep connections with other men, women, partners, and our children. So I'll just pause right there, Brother Jasmin, and welcome other folks in, and then we can have.
Thank you for that insight. Any brothers want to share your perspectives?
First and foremost, thanks, Dr. Grimmett. I think what you just laid out is what many brothers are struggling with all across this country and really across the continent. When we look at masculinity at its most simplest form, it's kind of hard to move away from this toxic masculinity, particularly in the Western world, where we are socialized to believe that men are not supposed to cry, men are not nurturers, men are only providers and protectors. And so and I know I've had relatives who would say something to the effect of, hey, look, we're going away for a week. I need you to take care of, let's say, your sisters and your mother while I'm gone, as if moms who have really endured the brunt of our existence, particularly in this world, since the dispensation of chattel slavery, can't handle that. And so we are teaching our boys to be misogynistic at an early age. What I love to be in this space with these brilliant brothers right here is because our energy is going to help elevate just the level of thinking and bring some introspection and some focus around how do we like really evaluate how we showing up, because it's a beautiful picture or poster that says, son, watch where you're going. And the son says to the father, no, dad, you watch where you're going because I'm following your footsteps. So the model that we create is the model that not only our son or community son is following, it's what future generations are following. And so we have to break this myth of the toxic masculinity, but also we have to prepare and create cycles and essentially COPs, communities of practices, where we are actually demonstrating why this type of platform is so critically necessary and critically important to move away from that methodology and thought process.
Good, good. Brother Joyner, Brother Norwood.
Yeah, so you guys covered it great, and as you speak, I just think about the work that we all do, and for the people listening, just thinking about if you can keep the mindset in mind as you approach these Black males, especially at the adolescent stage and the young adult stage, knowing that the struggle that comes with the maturation process, like you said, of learning yourself, that self-awareness, that ability to learn like recognize your triggers and things like that, just recognizing like conditioning and being able to strip the things that you've been taught and create your own rules and values when it comes to who you are as a man. So it's powerful stuff, like you said, that you said, and you all touched on it greatly, so I don't have to expound, but just as we do the work that we do, which we already know, but people that may be coming to gain more insight as you approach it, knowing that the anger, the withdrawn behaviors are manifestations of struggle. So not taking it personal, but really getting in there and trying to do the work to help these guys through that maturation process of finding themselves.
Well said, brothers. I had to take my time with this because Dr. Grimmett, he broke it down in a very scholarly way of what people can understand what it really is. Because the social engineering is going to tell you something different. And it's really a target, another target on black boys and black men, that we are toxic. And the social engineering with the rappers and the ball players or whoever creating this toxic dialogue and misogynistic behaviors, that's what they put out. That's the mail that they put out and say this is toxic masculinity. But they don't put out the positive males, the black males, because we have a ton of historical. So we don't. It's really. I don't get into terms like toxic masculinity, because it's about what the brain and the mind takes in. Because what you feed your soul is really what comes out. So when you get into the social engineering, you get into stuff like toxic masculinity, you're really telling yourself that you're toxic first and foremost. So if you don't understand who you are, you feel like you're toxic automatically. So it's really about what you take in, and we have to unplug from these type of things, because how we grew up, we have either a mirror where we have a perfect sense of self, we have an idealization, or where we follow people and see people as our role models because of lack of fathers, and we have our alter egos, where we create a person and become that person. So it's a lot of idealization and a lot of alter ego energy running around our community, and we have to have more mentors to help the younger generation out and to help them understand who they are as a human being.
All right, thank you, brothers. And a couple of things that I did hear you all speak about that that resonated was this keen sense of emotion and the critical nature of emotion. So as we transition in this conversation to emotion, I want Kenneth to kind of lead off in a response to the notion of emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is the capability of individuals to recognize their own emotions and those of others, the ability to discern between different feelings and then label them appropriately, and then use emotional information to guide their thinking and behavior and adjust emotions to adapt to certain environments. Now, therefore, emotional intelligence is critical to personal and professional success. But however, as a Black man, the lack of emotional intelligence can be the difference between life and death. So in spaces of mental health and well-being, you have been identified as an expert in the arena of emotional intelligence. So what is your insight on the importance of Black men having a high EQ and its bearing on their mental health and well-being?
Gotcha. So at the end of the day, for me, and that's why I harbor in on that, because it's the key. Because as human beings, we know we cannot exist without interacting with others, right? So our environment, we were just talking about like that conditioning and our environment and how it pulls on us and creates things in us. So we have to interact with our people around us in our environment. And with that being said, your key to climbing the ladder is the ability to exchange with people without pushing them off their rocker or let them push you off of your rocker. So with it being said, it's at the core opinion of your success. And for a Black man, it's kind of like multiplied because of those stigmas that's already there. So you have a short end of the stick. So anger, failure in the areas of things like Mr. Little said, like providing and those type of things can tear you down because you're already identifying yourself by how the world perceives you when you're coming up. So what you like when it comes to emotional intelligence, your ability to manage yourself, your emotions, and how others affect your emotion, and then also be able to interact with people in a way to kind of, for lack of better words, manipulate their emotions, which is usually a word that's given a negative context, but manipulate just means operating in a way to adjust something. So being able to interact with people in a way that gives the best response possible from them. These are all things that help you, like you said, in the professional world, but also in your personal life. It keeps stress levels down, which can keep medical issues down. It's a direct correlation between certain exacerbation of medical issues and things like that. So it's the key to me to longevity and success.
Thank you. Thank you.
We can weigh in on that.
Yes, sir. Brothers, please.
Yeah, I appreciate what Brother Kenneth just said about the importance of emotional intelligence, particularly for Black males. And I think about it in this way, Kenneth. I wonder what you think about it. Like I was trying to put this in practical terms about, and Vaughn references as well, like how we interact with each other based on our environments and what we've seen and the kind of stuff that goes into us. Because the most natural thing for, like, you see little boys and little girls, they're interacting, playing with each other. They're not like, they haven't developed the concept of masculinity yet. But
Right.
But us, like, we know each other in this panel, but let's say we walk and see each other in the street. Like, we have some options. Are we gonna acknowledge each other at all? Like, we might, because I see the younger brothers, like, and I'm not gonna blame it on the younger brothers, but it just depends on where you are. Sometimes brothers don't even acknowledge my existence. I'm looking to acknowledge them, and they don't acknowledge me. So we can be like that. That shows some level of emotional intelligence. Or if I see Jasmin, I know that he's gonna give me a head nod, or he might give me a pound. He might give me a hug. That's a whole. But I have to know how to navigate, like, that I can do that with Jasmin. I think ultimately I want to get to the point where I'm coming up with brothers and I know I can have a relationship with them. I can be vulnerable with them, like Kelly said, and really be a full human being. But navigate, that's a critical skill that we need to be exposed to, because otherwise we're going to default to this mess that Vaughn talked about earlier, that where it's a very limited range of things we can do as Black men.
Right.
Strong.
Man, oh man, oh man. First and foremost, thanks, Brother Joyner, right? Thanks, Dr. Grimmett. This is something in my coaching practice, right? I always focus on, because we're socialized again to believe that IQ is the thing that's going to help us in our trajectory in life. When in reality, if we are not in a space where we interact with one another, one, for our own personal edification and growth, but number two, if the pandemic has not shown people anything else but to wear a mask, I would invite you to think about the mask that we've been wearing since slavery, right? Which is the mask that we put on to help other people be comfortable with who we are. When in reality, us understanding who we are is so critically necessary and important to us being able to take our movement to a completely different level. To Doc's point, I mean, I don't know how many times I've been in grocery store and I've seen people who look like me. Now, if I had my suit jacket on, they interact with me very differently. But I chose very intentionally. Normally, I don't wear a suit jacket. When I'm talking to kids, you know what I mean? It's about accepting them how they are and helping them to feel comfortable in who they are. And now we're building a platform and a space for them to share their brilliant ideas and their brilliant skill set. So emotional intelligence on so many levels is the foundation for us to build a solid house that allows us to get back to our prowess, our greatness, and those many things that we have accomplished well before 400 years ago.
Yeah, yes, you brothers hitting it right on the head. When I think of emotional intelligence, I think of how you was raised, because we are learned and taught how to be. So I'm a life coach as well. And what I teach is identity and knowledge of self, transparency, and congruency. So after having these conversations about the presented issues, now, who are you? Because in life, who are you and what is your purpose? Those are the two things that we must be mindful of, right? Because we all have a purpose in life, and we all can be true to that purpose if we know who we are, and it's easier to navigate that purpose once we know who we are. So I do a bunch of purpose-driven empowerment programs, and emotional intelligence is important because without, passing by and saying hello to anybody that walks by, just lets you know the mental space that you're in. So emotional intelligence is very important just by understanding the person's mental space, how they greet you. I like to say peace king because I like to hold you at the highest level of yourself. So when I say peace king, knowing, my son, he's 5 years old, he already know we was pharaohs and kings before anything, right? But before that, we was human beings, right? So knowing that the cultural side, we was pharaohs and kings before anything. But knowing on the spiritual side, we all human beings, right? So emotional intelligence is very important.
Yeah, and I appreciate those comments about emotional intelligence, and being in this space with you brothers, as well as those who may be out there viewing this, understanding the importance of emotional intelligence, again, can make the difference between success and failure in life and death. But I want to also kind of dive into emotional intelligence in regards to the younger generation. And I want to kind of shift the conversation around Black boys and the community and trauma. We forget about the youth, and we have to always stop when we talk about men. We have to remember that men were once boys at one point, and so we have to talk about the cultivation of these Black boys. So I have two African proverbs that I want to share in one quote. The first African proverb is, "It takes a village to raise a child," which references that it requires an entire community of people to interact with our youth in order to for them to grow in a healthy and safe environment. But then you have the second African proverb, which is my favorite African proverb, which says that the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. In other words, a child that is rejected by his community is in a devastating situation that often only gets worse as the child grows up. So to accompany those two African proverbs, though, I want to jump on Brother Frederick Douglass's quote, which says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Now, Vaughn, I want to come to you to start off this conversation, and knowing that your heart's work has been on finding purpose and empowerment, like you shared, through identity development, knowledge of self, transparency, and congruency. Now, if you take those two African proverbs and the Frederick Douglass quote into account, what is the call to action to address the trauma in an effort to cultivate an environment of positive mental health and well-being for Black boys?
First, we have to have an understanding of trauma. Trauma for anybody is just a deeply depressing or disturbing experience or experiences, right? For childhood, it's an event that is overwhelmingly emotionally painful and disturbing, and can have long-lasting effects. So childhood is where it's most important because a child's mind is easily manipulated. So based off his or her experiences, specifically Black boys, his experience of childhood trauma will lead to things like high anxiety. For boys in general, Black boys in general, we're two times more likely to develop depression, 3 times more likely to develop anxiety. And these type of disorders, right, can lead to mental illness like bipolar, even schizophrenia. So how deep the rabbit hole goes with trauma is especially needed to be addressed at the childhood stage. So trauma is very important and understanding, because we got generational trauma. That's cultural trauma, right? The slavery, the Jim Crow, the Black Codes, right? The mandatory manumissions, after Reconstruction, compromise of 1877. So we got constant targets from generational trauma, which can be read in Joy DeGruy book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, or W.E.B. Du Bois, Souls of Black Folks, The Double Consciousness, right? So trauma goes deep in our community. And if not addressed, then we see as an adult, we carry on and lead our family with those same traumas of anger, hurt, sadness, frustration, irritation. And I call it the boiling pot, right? The gumbo of negative feelings, right? And we carry that negative feelings into our family, into our lives. And that's just not knowing who we are. So it's important to know who we are. What I teach, it's important to know who we are in the identity phase. It's important to know the history of who you are in the cultural stage, and it's important for you to be that person unapologetically and be consistent with those behaviors.
Speak to it, brothers. Speak to it.
Brother Vaughn laid a very brilliant foundation and groundwork. When we look and talk about this with our youth, you know, you often hear the term ACEs, trauma-informed, and ACEs being adverse childhood experiences, and trauma-informed. And a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, I'm not speaking in our community. Outside of our community, many times, there are white educators who feel that that's enough. But adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed actions without cultural competence is enough for us to create significant damage with our young people. We have to do a better job of moving away from some of the things that has historically happened with just do what I say. We're working with a generation of folk who need to be unmuted. So we're not allowing trauma to build upon trauma to build upon trauma, and help the work that both Dr. Grimmett, Brother Joyner, and Brother Vaughn are doing, because we are making it okay to be in spaces. Yes, we need to get people in counseling, but we need to help them be in conversation where they feel comfortable sharing without having the thought of a repercussion of someone fussing at them or someone giving punishment, as opposed to helping them to navigate that. And then sometimes we also have to make sure through Brother Vaughn's systematic design of how he worked with folk in terms of the life navigation and the coaching, you are constantly building up a young man so that he doesn't have to go in these other spaces. And I say that because I think it was William Glasser who speaks to choice theory and reality theory, right? All behavior is purposeful, right? So let's give them intention and purpose that validates their greatness. Words are so powerful, right? And symbology is another thing. We live in a society that continually bombards us with images of other people being our savior. And no matter, and somebody spoke to this earlier, no matter how many times and how much we do that's productive and good, the image we'll get is all the negative stuff. And they did that with Sister Breonna Taylor. Like, that doesn't excuse the atrocity. So the more we have these forums like this and really orient people to getting the support and help, what we're doing now is letting our young people know that it is okay. And they do bring great value. And then that's replicated in other communities. And so now we have a healing community, but we can't do it from a space of not going through our own healing ourselves. To Brother Vaughn's point earlier, I don't know how many times I sat on a panel with folk and we're talking about this very conversation, and you can still see the anger and animosity in them. And I, being an individual who has both did 8 deployments in the military, and I will openly say that I suffered from and continue to fight with post-traumatic stress disorder. But in addition to that, I didn't have my father. So I understand the importance of making sure that I, one, do the counseling, but also as a part of engaging in conversations like these, we continue to heal ourselves. And so also running kids and adults through radical village healing circles that allow us to purge some of that pain and that trauma so that we show up whole and create the model.
I mean, you guys hit it on the head, and like you said, it's our job, and as much as we can influence people to embrace the concept of creating a safe holding environment for our young Black boys that's dealt with trauma. I look at it, and as I think about it, a lot of young Black boys are defined and labeled according to their reactions to trauma without looking at their experience and defining them by that to help them. So if they keep seeing that negative consequence, like you're labeled a criminal or you're labeled angry, they struggle with that thing we were talking about before, as far as finding themselves and identifying with themselves, because you told them that they're angry and they've seen that they've shown anger, but they don't even know why and where it's come from, because we haven't gone through the process of going back and explaining to them that that's a reaction to that trauma and those different things. So talking about like it being handed down, perspective is reality. So then they grow up and they become parents, and their view of the world is, I need to play defense because the world will hurt you. And they've never got to the root of whatever it was that was going on. So now we get that cycle of children. And I like to use the word generational patterns, but people will say generational curses. And we can make, like, some people make it this big spiritual thing, but at the core, it's just a passing down of perspective, because perspective is reality. So our job is to get in there as best we can and change that approach, change the systems that they go through, the school systems, community systems, and those things. So we can start to identify them as a whole person. Like, okay, they dealt with this, so this is a reaction to that. Let's mend it, as opposed to that's the troublemaker from such and such's class. Watch them, and then you start to condition yourself as to who they are, and you place that label on them subconsciously. So it's a big task, but one by one we can do it, or at least make progress toward it.
That's good. That's good. That's good. And when we talk about trauma, we also have to talk about healing.
Hold.
And
Mr. Spain.
yes, go for it.
It's something that I miss in talking about the village. That's, and I feel is the Bronfman-Brenner ecological system, right? The person, the family, and the community. So how this person acts at home, how the community, how he acts in his environment, how he acts in school. This is why the village is important, right? Because of those things, because of these systematic issues, right? The systematic racism and the structural racism, right? That goes on in the school. So I want to make a correlation, right? Because I grew up from one of the predominantly Black communities. I don't know a predominantly Black community that's rich. All the predominantly Black communities I know is low socioeconomic status, meaning disenfranchised, impoverished communities. So the community I grew up from was homeowners, the grandmothers, right? But the crack epidemic hit, right? And it wiped out the whole generation, right? It wiped out the whole generation in the 80s and 90s, right? So now we're gonna correlate what the crack epidemic did to now we got the school to prison pipeline, right? Crack epidemic, it was 1 out of every 5 Black males statistically will end up in prison. Today, 1 out of every 3 Black males will end up in prison, right? So this is why the village is important, because that correlation that I'm presenting in the school system is we all know the diagnosis of ADHD, right? That's a heavy diagnosis with our Black children, right? and is more so in poor Black children, right? So understanding why the village is important, because from that crack epidemic where they wiped out the fathers and mothers mostly, right? Today we got even younger mothers today taking care of children. And just like the Willie Lynch letters, right? We take the father away, the mother would give a child to the system. That's exactly what they're doing with ADHD, right? The mother is primarily caregiver of a broken home, and she's giving the child to the system because she can't deal with him being hyper, right? So we have to understand why this is important. And we have to make sure we have these entities in place to protect our Black children from being diagnosed, right? Because that diagnosis would carry them on to their adulthood, and now they will have a stigma placed on them from childhood, and this is from early as age 2 years old, they being diagnosed. 2 years old up to 17. So the whole generation of Black boys is being diagnosed from 2 to 17. And when we talk about Black people, we're not talking about middle class. We're not talking about upper middle class. We're talking about lower middle class, lower socioeconomic status, impoverished students, poor Black children. These are the ones that we're talking about. These are the ones that need the protection because they are the ones that come from the broken home, that are on the welfare system, that don't have a clue about what this system is doing or what it's creating. So that's the importance of the village question that I wanted to get out.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Brother Jazz, I know you got to jump to the next question, but Vaughn laid something that I got to tie into, right? Both Brother Joyner and Dr. Grimmett work in that clinical space. And Brother Vaughn works in the clinical space too. But when we talking about this conversation of a village, one, they even taking the village away from us because a lot of times we owned our properties historically. Now people are not owning them. And so even when we look at gentrification, and moving certain people out, raising the property value, now I can no longer pay that, right? So even that is disenfranchised. Even when we have a community, there's no community because nobody wants to talk to one another because of fear, some other things. But to Brother Vaughn's point, I wanted to break down real quick Title 4A, Title 4D, and Title 4E, right? Temporary assistance for needy families, 4A. 4E, the foster care system, which about, I think it kind of changes, like between 50 and 60% of our kids fall up into, right? And then Title 4D, which is the child support system. Now, watch how all this ties into this whole platform, right? The school or prison pipeline, which is supposed to be a state institution, which is a private institution, right? It makes no sense to me that our boys are doing extremely well in 3rd grade, and then all of a sudden you had this drop off. Is this by design? When we talk about ADHD and ADHD, and we look at the symptoms, I'm so thankful that we have the 3 gentlemen we have on this platform, because I don't know how many times I had to check those who didn't look like us because they put a diagnosis on one of our kids and they never even took the time to look at this from an anecdotal standpoint and quantify that over a given period of time, because on any given day, if you take a DSM-5, I can diagnose anybody in the United States with a disorder, right? And we say, let's multitask, which is actually truly not true. When you do the research, you can't even really multitask. But the very characteristics tied to multitasking can kind of be close to that definition of ADHD. So now, are we saying on one end, you got to do this in the workplace, and I'm seeing my parents do this, and then I'm looking at these behaviors. So all this stuff ties in and play a significant part of, again, that symbology and that socializations of the Western world of really getting us off track and distracting us, which is why we got to make sure we elevate the voices of these 3 gentlemen in our communities and create support systems for families so that they know how to navigate this. And then also go back and reclaim our village by, as men return from prison, we have to integrate them back into society and help them get employment, and then address not the surface level problems that they like to address, but to Brother Joyner's point, we have to get to the root cause. This is about pain. Even if I'm a 50-year-old man, if I never got through a developmental stage, I'm stuck in that stage. So until we revisit it, we will continue to be in that space. I ain't gonna take up all the time, but I had to talk about those three systems again, which means we have to create a system or institution to rival that system or institution to equitabilize the playing ground, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And to make it come all full circle, I mean, we've talked about masculinity with Black men. We've talked about the emotional intelligence of Black men. And now we've talked about trauma from Black boys who eventually will grow up to be Black fathers or Black husbands. So when we talk about trauma, we also have to talk about healing. So in the transition, we know that, that practices such as mindfulness and meditation have great benefits in regards to some of these emotional responses that decrease stress, anxiety, etc. Now, Brother Kelly, I'm going to shift over to you, and then we'll all engage in this conversation about self-care. But with you being a certified professional mindfulness and meditation teacher, you see the benefits of these practices of self-care. So in regards to Black men and their mental health and well-being, what can we do to encourage brothers, young and seasoned, to become educated, aware, and more importantly, incorporate these self-care practices in their lives?
I think the first thing, like anything else, is really understanding it for ourselves first, because it's a proven fact that our children and our young people model what we model for them, right? So when you look at mindfulness and meditation, two different things, and people use them interchangeably, but mindfulness is really just a state of being aware, right? And as we talk about trauma and frustration and anger, we even have been talking about mindfulness in schools for years, but they didn't call it mindfulness. They said, go over in the corner and count to 10. Well, why am I counting to 10? It's going to de-excite, right, your body, so that now, instead of just acting off emotion, you're actually giving yourself a moment to allow like your adrenaline to slow down, which now makes you or helps you to critically think even more. And then the science and research behind it says that when you practice mindfulness alone, you have 8 classic points on your brain that rise and fall in unison. Now, when you incorporate it with meditation as well, all 16 points on your brain rise and fall at the same time, which has huge not only implications, but research from Harvard says that not only will it help with self-regulation, it helps with clarity, it helps with focus. Athletes are using it, entertainers use it. We have to understand and use it. We often face what I call a rites of passage, the school system, elementary, middle, high school, right? And we focus on learning subjects and topics. And I think it was Brother Vaughn who said it earlier. How much time are we spending learning ourselves, right? Once we learn ourselves and we practice that mindfulness and meditation, what we're doing is we're putting ourselves in a space of peace. Now, our amygdala was wonderfully created for a reason, right? A lot of times we driving and we get frustrated. When we get frustrated, our amygdala takes over and we get extremely upset and frustrated many times. That's not what that fight or flight was designed for. It's if I'm in Eastern North Carolina or Western North Carolina and a big black bear come up, it's going to allow me to right. I'm not going to fight that black bear. I'm running from the black bear. And so my speed increases. If that if it grabs me and it bites into me, because all of that cortisol and adrenaline is rushing, it's not going to taste good. So, but consequently, the other piece to it is, if you're practicing the mindfulness and the meditation, instead of you pushing cortisol and adrenaline, what you're doing is your natural hormones like serotonin and dopamine, which also elevates, it's like a bliss chemical, right? We ain't talking about drugs, but it's a natural chemical that allows you to be feeling good about yourself, feeling great. And also what I didn't mention is that meditation is a verifiable fourth level of consciousness that thus helps with healing to the body, but it's 2 to 5 times more restful than the third level, which is sleep. Imagine that, 2 to 5 times more beneficial to you than sleep. So we have to create spaces where we can get this information out. And it used to be, what is he doing? That's not cool. Once I learned about it and understood the benefit from it, one, because, excuse me, I told you I did 8 deployments with the military. And I mean, I've been in combat on the front line and had soldiers and watched death and all those different things. So I had to find a way to reduce some of that pain, some of that stress. And that was the space. And in addition to the mindfulness and the meditation, understanding how to breathe, which our brother George Floyd can no longer do. We breathe shallow in the Western world. However, our body needs to be oxygenated, which means we need to take deeper breaths. And so one of the ways we can encourage this is by using platforms like school systems. When I'm particularly doing, mentoring / sponsorship with our young people, I'm teaching them the art of meditation as early as 2nd and 3rd grade, because they get it. And then in middle school. And then when you start to do that, and particularly with the kids who are the so-called cool kids, you do it with them, everybody else gonna follow. So, we just have to be strategic and tactical. The same way we will write a business plan is the same way we need to approach this with our young people and allow them to give us feedback, because they have a voice that's extremely important. And lastly, before I stop, we can't forget that suicide is at an all-time high with our young people in America, particularly Black and brown boys.
Yeah. I mean, you took that thing home, but to your point about the cool kids, like as we work forward, our job is to normalize not only meditation but just buying into mental health therapy and resources in general. So I think about certain people that's pushing the movement forward, and I would love to see a lot more about figures, our public figures push forward with Brandon Marshall with his House of Athlete platform that he's using to bridge like sports and athletes and mental health. So our job is to put that thing on Front Street as best we can and get these people to buy into it, because like you said, conditioning is huge, especially in our culture and with our young Black boys. So if we put it in front of them and we attach it to the right figures, sadly enough, it'll get them to buy in. We want to get to a point where they don't necessarily buy in just because the cool people are doing it, but we got to utilize every vehicle that we have. So if we can get it in their hands through public figures that they follow and look up to, we can get them to buy into it.
Jasmin, I know we're at the end. The thing I say was, just in wrapping up, if we think about Black boys or Black men who were once Black boys, our job as members of their communities is to imagine that they're on a playground that has every toy and every game that they can imagine. And we want to keep that playground as big for them as possible for as long as possible. When you're dealing with trauma and these lanes of masculinity, all it's doing is like making their world smaller, making their connections smaller, making who they can be smaller. So our job is to keep that big, as long as we can. And we like, cause so I mean, I've been inspired by Kelly, Vaughn, Kenneth and you. I had so much to say. So I was trying to figure out like what's one little thing I can add to this. The last thing is I try to show my children, they see me. When I see a brother, whether I know them or not, I open up, I say what's up, I acknowledge them. They know that I'm gonna do that. It's a joke, you know, to my little, they know that from the time they were able to pick it up that I'm gonna do that. The other thing I do to them every day, multiple times a day, I tell them that I love them. And then I explain to them why I love them and why it's important that I tell them every day. And I tell them why I speak to other brothers. I was like, we share a common experience because we had this beautiful skin. And these connections are important because they get us through the stuff that we have to deal with sometimes. It's a beautiful, that's a part of my healing. You know what I'm saying? Because Jasmin knows this in class. I have fire in me, Kelly. I haven't been through what you've been through, but I've been through some things. I have fire. So I either channel that fire to like be love, like this radical love. I'm gonna burn every single thing down around me that Jasmin talked about. And I'm 47, thank God I'm 47 years old, but I didn't necessarily imagine that I didn't necessarily see myself making it to 47. I know what Vaughn talked about in the cracked out 80s. So I saw what it. So anyway, the point is that in order for me not to burn down my village unintentionally or intentionally, or like get knocked off my rocker like Kenneth talked about, I have to connect with brothers like you because y'all know what it's like. And that's part of my healing. I'm a mental health professional. I have a mental health professional that I see, and my natural supports are these communities like this. So I give great thanks to you all. And even though it's like my first time meeting most of you, I love you fundamentally. And thank you for the opportunity.
No doubt. Vaughn.
Man, that was love, man. The love is reciprocated for sure. That's what I lead. I lead by example. I've always been that person that led with love because I'm a loving person. As far as the meditation goes, I put that in our book, A Journey to Spiritual Health. Meditation is key. Being mindful is key. Being present is key because being present with yourself will help you navigate how you think and feel. And then it's easier to seek resources. So mindfulness is important. We run in our healing workshops. We got a yoga instructor and my queen. She does meditation as well with groups. So meditation is very important to staying present because we got to understand the statistics. 1 out of every 3rd Black woman will die due to stress-related issues. So just being mindful of how you feel and releasing that through meditation and learning how to deep breathe, that helps you blow out, release the pressure from your mind, from your brain and from your body. Because we get so in tune with our mind, right? But we really don't have a mind, right? We have a brain, right? And we have a heart, right? We really don't have a soul. You know, we talk a lot about the mind and the soul, but we can't see those things in our bodies, right? So we have to focus on the things that we have first before we get to the mind and the soul, or we'll overthink things and let our soul take over our body without knowing who we are. So that's love, man.
No doubt, no doubt. And like I shared earlier, I'm the founder and the president of You Good Bro Incorporated, which is a nonprofit solution-focused organization that centers on, again, transparency, vulnerability, providing a safe space for liberation. And one of the inspirations of You Good Bro is Jason Wilson's book, Cry Like a Man, The Emancipation from Emotional Incarceration. And he says in the book that every boy needs a crew and every man needs camaraderie and a safe space to not only express his emotions, but also release them, venting his cares to someone who cares. And as men, we must take care of ourselves by truthfully expressing ourselves with other men we can trust. No matter our age, transparency will set us free. So I'll say to you, brothers, I love you. And thank you for sharing your experiences, your perspectives with us today. And I pray that you will continue to do the work that you've been called to do, not only just for yourselves, but for the future. And for everyone who's joined us today, we thank you for entering into this dialogic space with us. And we ask that you continue to engage in the Black Lens Symposium as we close out, and that you will take what you've learned and what you've heard and apply it to your day-to-day work. Peace.
All right.